Welcome to Garden Sanity. I'm Laura, and I garden in Zone 7, Southern New Jersey. And today I'm going to talk to you about 6 spring blooming perennials that are long blooming and easy care that you're going to love to have in your garden. Now, each of these plants has 5 traits that I think make for an outstanding spring blooming perennial. First, they're long blooming, and you want blooms that are going to last more than just a week. You don't want to be seeing something outside and then you go out the next week and it's already gone. So you want it to be long blooming. Secondly, you want there to be something beyond the blooming season. So once the flowers are gone, you want beautiful foliage. Maybe it's tall stems that are beautiful. Maybe it's short variegated foliage. You want something that's pretty to look at that will complement the rest of your garden. You want them to be unfussy. You don't want to have to baby these plants. I mean, let's face it, in the spring, you're busy doing pruning, you're doing weeding, you're doing all kinds of things. The last thing you want to do is have to be worrying about fussing over your spring blooming perennials. You want them to be resilient, and that includes handling the elements, such as spring rain, which we've had way too much of in New Jersey. But you also, being resilient means that they come back easily year after year. Now, yes, perennials come back every year, but some are a little bit more temperamental than others, and these are all very easy. They come back reliably. And then finally, an extra little point is if they're deer resistant and or rabbit resistant. Now, not all of these are, most of them are. And as I go through each plant, I'll let you know which ones are and aren't, and I'm also going to tell you all the growing requirements and the hardiness zones. So let's get started. Now, this first plant is Paint the Town Magenta Dianthus. Now, Paint the Town Magenta is one of the earliest blooming Dianthus. Now, the entire Paint the Town series, of which magenta is just one of the colors, well, this series has been bred for not only bright color, but also heat tolerance. So this means that those of us in warmer zones can grow this plant with confidence. Now, in terms of the flower color, I guess the flower color, of course, is called magenta. I think of it as a warm fuchsia, not as fuchsia as the Fire Witch Dianthus, which is another popular variety. But I guess I'll say fuchsia mixed with magenta, like if you were mixing paint colors. Now, the flowers are small, as this is a shorter perennial, but because each plant's blanketed with flowers in the spring, the color makes quite an impact, as you see here. And by the way, if you deadhead the flowers, you can have sporadic blooms throughout the summer, though they won't be nearly as prolific as the spring blooming period. Now, you may also get another round of blooms in early fall, depending, of course, on the weather, your gardening zone, and of course if Mother Nature feels like cooperating with you. Now, I have a video about deadheading Dianthus that I'll link to below this video in the description area for you to see. Now, perennial evergreen Dianthus are low-growing plants, and the foliage color is usually a blue-green shade, as you see here. Now, Dianthus is in the carnation family, so these stems definitely remind me of larger carnation flowers. Now, this variety, as I said, is evergreen, which is absolutely wonderful. I love the color in fall and winter, and although in the fall, well, they can be leaf catchers, I do end up cleaning mine off a few times during the winter season, and I have lovely blue-green patches for winter interest. That's the best way I can describe them. Now, this plant is not native to North America, for those of you interested in native plants. Its size is small. It just reaches 6 to 8 inches tall, with an eventual spread of 12 to 14 inches wide. It's hardy in zones 4 to 9. It takes full sun. In fact, where I have my Dianthus sited in my front yard garden beds, they're in full sun and they can handle it even during the brutal midsummer weather. Now, they handle spring rain really well, as you also see here, and these blooms practically cover the pretty blue-green foliage, which is wonderful. Now, for soil and water, it just needs average soil, and it doesn't need as much water once it's established, so it's great for the front of your flower gardens or borders, but it's still going to need water during those dry spells. So Dianthus is deer resistant, and some say it's also rabbit resistant, but please check out one of my short videos here on my YouTube channel of a rabbit eating my Dianthus flowers in our backyard. It was a different variety of Dianthus, but the video is definitely worth a watch. I haven't seen rabbits nibble on these particular Paint the Town Magenta Dianthus at all so far, and these are in our front yard where rabbits will visit now and again. The next plant is Geum Tempo Rose. Now, Geum Tempo Rose has a longer bloom time than other Geums, except for Totally Tangerine, which I'll show you in a moment. The flowers are rosy pink in color with some veining on the petals. The petals also look a bit ruffly, if that's a word. The flowers resemble small roses, and this makes sense because Geum is in the rose family of plants. Now, some of the flowers will start to fade, while others are just opening up. So as you see here, you get a gorgeous variety of color. The dark-colored stems are shorter than Totally Tangerine and never flop. Foliage remains an attractive green color with beautiful leaves the rest of the season, well into fall. The leaves have been described as strawberry-like and are a bit fuzzy to the touch. Now, Geum Tempo Rose is evergreen in warmer zones, and here you can see what it looks like in the winter and in the early spring. There are hints of a reddish burgundy to the leaves, especially when the temperatures really dip. And some of the leaves will turn brown or get brown edges, but these are all easily cleaned up in the spring. Now, Geum was originally found in Europe, Asia, North and South America, South Africa, and New Zealand, but not all varieties are native to North America. Now, the height of the leaves of Geum Tempo Rose is approximately 8 inches tall by 12 inches wide. But when the flowers are blooming, the total height of the plant is approximately 21 inches tall. It's hardy in zones 4 to 9. It takes full sun to part sun, and it needs moist soil. So don't let the soil dry out completely, especially during the first few years while it's getting established. But the watering requirement is just average, so don't drown it either. With all the spring rain we've been having here in New Jersey, I have yet to water anything this season. Now, Geum is deer resistant and rabbit resistant, and it's also rarely bothered by any pests or disease. So Geum Totally Tangerine is a long-blooming, sterile variety. This means it produces many more flowers over a long period of time, much more so than older varieties of Geum. It flowers into early summer, then sporadically if deadheaded. The flowers of Totally Tangerine are a pretty light orange shade with hints of red on the petals. They maintain their bright color even in full sun, and there's really no fading until the flowers start to fade as their bloom time is up. But just like with the Geum Tempo Rose, you'll get flowers ending while others are just beginning. So as you see here, it's simply beautiful against the green foliage. Now, the tall stems are green, and the leaves are like I described for Geum Tempo Rose, a really attractive green color with beautiful leaves the rest of the season well into fall. And again, the leaves have been described as strawberry-like and are a bit fuzzy to the touch. So Totally Tangerine is evergreen in warmer zones. So just like with Geum Tempo Rose, you'll get some green leaves with maybe some hints of red if the temperatures dip below freezing. Sometimes you get some really cold spells. Some edges might get brown. All of this can easily be cleaned up in the springtime, but for the most part, it looks really attractive if you're in a warmer zone. And like I said before, not all varieties of Geum are native to North America. So the size of Totally Tangerine is taller than Geum Tempo Rose, 14 inches tall, by 18 inches wide. However, when Totally Tangerine is in bloom, it can reach up to 30 inches tall. As you see here, it's absolutely beautiful. Now, it's hardy in zones 4 to 7. It takes full sun to part sun, and it needs moist soil. So again, don't let the soil dry out completely, especially during the first few years while it's getting established. And again, watering is average, so you don't need to drown it either. And it's deer and rabbit resistant, again, rarely bothered by pests or disease. Next is Amsonia Storm Cloud. This is such a successful plant for so many gardeners that Proven Winners has named it this year's National Landscape Perennial of the Year. It's very low maintenance and it's heat and humidity tolerant, so many of us across the country can grow this. What's super cool is how different this plant is at its various growing stages. So in the spring, for example, when the stems first emerge, they're a dark olive, almost black color with very dark leaves. Now, the stems remain dark throughout the spring, and the leaves have silver veining on each one. Then the flowers arrive, and wow! Now, my Amsonia Storm Cloud, it's only 2 years old, so I'm still looking forward to its mature size and seeing many more flowers than I'm even enjoying this year. But you know, there's always something to look forward to in the garden, right? So each flower, it's star-shaped, and the color is a pretty periwinkle blue shade, which is one of my favorite colors. Now, once the flowers are finished, this taller perennial remains lovely as a backdrop to other flowering perennials and shrubs in your garden. Now, young plants, like mine, have a vase shape, but it will spread out as it matures over time. Now, this plant is an evergreen. However, Amsonias have pretty fall color, and here's what it looks like. It's like a warm yellow shade. It's so lovely. Now, it dies off, but not to the ground. In my case, the stems remain, and they're sort of like an off-white color. Now, I keep the stems to remind me where they are in the garden, but you don't have to. You can remove those stems as long as you know where the plants are. But I like to keep the stems. They actually do provide a tiny bit of winter interest. Now, this is a perennial that is native to North America, and Storm Cloud is an improved version of the native that does well for gardeners in both northern and southern hardiness zones. So the size is 24 to 30 inches tall, with a spread of 38 to 42 inches once it matures over time. Now my smaller plant was planted in 2021 in another bed, and I moved it into this bed last year, while the larger plant was planted in fall of 2022, so they've still got a ways to go until they mature. Now Amsonia Storm Cloud is hardy in zones 4 to 9. It can take full sun to part shade, and again, it has average water needs, just don't let it dry out. This plant is actually very agreeable because it can grow in both poor soils or fertile soils, and just about everything in between. Now Storm Cloud is deer resistant, and some places claim it's also rabbit resistant, but I can't personally confirm that because we have it planted in our backyard, which we've basically sealed off from any rabbits coming in. I say basically because those rabbits are crafty, and I never know if maybe someday they're just going to parachute down from the sky, for example, just to make nests for their babies back here. I wouldn't put it past them. And now we come to Bergenia Peppermint Patty, and Bergenia is also known as pig squeak or heartleaf Bergenia. Now this is a plant that's new this year, so look out for this at your local garden nursery, or ask them if they can order it for you if you don't see it. Bergenia is called pig squeak because of the supposed sound the leaves make when rubbed together after it rains. Now I haven't tried this personally, but I really need to so I can actually experience it. Now the flowers open with some reddish small leaves holding on to the flowers, like you see here. Most of the flowers begin looking white. But as they open, you're going to see these flowers have a deeper pink throat and edges that color the petals all the way down into the center. Now the flowers on Peppermint Patty are larger than other Bergenias, and that's what makes this one special. Now the stems are a bright rose pink, and those stems gradually turn more green as they go down towards the base of the plant. Now the leaves are, and I quote this from Walter's Gardens, which bred this plant, the leaves are, quote, wavy, serrated leaves that are extra thick with prickly toothed edges. And I quote this because I think it's a perfect description of the leaves. They are so unique to look at. They have a waxy look to them too. Now this is an evergreen plant, but it's evergreen in a little bit of a different way. The large leaves are going to remain green, although they will take on stunning red shades during the winter season, which I completely fell in love with. Now this is not native to North America, just so you know. And by the way, Bergenia also do well in containers, so keep that in mind. Now the size is approximately 22 inches tall by 18 inches wide, with the flowers blooming just a bit taller than that. It's hardy in zones 4 to 8. It takes full sun, partial shade, or full shade. And again, it has average water needs. It loves moist soil, but it dislikes standing water. And Bergenia Peppermint Patty is deer and rabbit resistant, which is great. Now, I plan on buying another Peppermint Patty because I just adore her so much. She has proven to be outstanding all 4 seasons, and I actually didn't even expect that in her first year. So I love this plant. And the final plant I want to share for you is Brunnera Jack of Diamonds. This is also a new plant this year at garden nurseries, and Jack of Diamonds is going to be the 2025 Perennial of the Year for proven winners. Now, I planted this last spring, so this is my first spring enjoying the pretty flowers. Brunnera are so pretty in the garden, and they also do well in containers. The buds are a warm light purple color, opening to tiny flowers that are a gorgeous blue with tiny pure white centers. These tiny flowers have been described as similar to forget-me-not flowers. Now, Jack of Diamonds is a larger Brunnera than other varieties, with huge 9 to 10 inch leaves that overlap at the base. These leaves are heavily veined in dark green with a silver coloring in between the dark green, but you still see some medium green coloring as well. It's truly gorgeous for a shady spot in your landscape. Now, this is not an evergreen plant. It will die back to the ground in zone 7 for the winter, so make sure you mark where it is so that you remember before it comes up in the spring. And Brunnera is not native to North America. Now the size of Jack of Diamonds is between 14 and 16 inches tall, with an eventual mature spread of 28 to 32 inches after a few years. It's hardy in zones 3 to 8, it can take part shade to full shade, and it has similar water needs to its friend Peppermint Patty Bergenia. Average water, don't let it dry out. It prefers moist soil, especially in more southern areas, and it's deer resistant. And I love Jack of Diamonds so much I already bought another one and I'm going to plant it nearby here. So let me know in the comments if you grow any of these plants. And if you're looking for more perennials to consider for your garden, watch these 2 videos next. One is on evergreen perennials, and the other is on plants rabbits hate. In other words, perennials that rabbits hate that you're going to love. And until next time, happy gardening.